Deadbolt Live. We are live every Tuesday from 2 to 4. Thank you for those who are here with us now. For those of you who are listening to it on a podcast or previous recording, try to get here live. It's where the magic happens, and you get to ask questions in the chat. It's really cool. So make sure you try to get here live next time. First, a little message from our sponsors. Sponsors plural. We just got a new one. First, we'd like to shout out Josh Bowman with Bowman Vision Media. He sponsored Deadbolt, and he does high voltage marketing for low voltage companies. And then we got SS and SI Dealer Network. So we have Jake Vall offered to sponsor a Deadbolt as well, and we're very excited about that. But we are here because Terry, I've heard other people reference him as Mr. CPTED. I'm very excited to talk about this. Terry, can you give us some background on your career and what you're doing now?
Absolutely, Dominic. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the show, and to your sponsors again for making this possible. It's really exciting to be here, and again, thank you so much. So, for me, my career spans probably 30 years almost at this stage, all within the security space. But a big part of what I do is CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design. I currently sit on the board of the US CPTED as one of the founding directors beneath Art Hushin at the NICP. And I also am a director of the Secure Building Council alongside Paula, Ben, Tom, and Brian. And we might talk about the SHIELD certification at some point. I'm also a CPTED instructor with the NICP based out of Tampa, which is the National Institute of Crime Prevention, and the only CPTED NICP instructor based outside of North America, even though I do spend a lot of time within the US. I do have a book coming out later on this year entitled The CPTED Paradigm, a holistic approach to crime prevention. And again, we will touch on that within some of the questions, because I do have a dedicated chapter to one of those questions also. Really excited to be here. This is, we spoke beforehand before we came on air about CPTED, what it means to me. It really is, it's not a job, it's not something I do, it's my passion, it's what I do. I believe it makes a difference. It has made a difference. It will make a difference. We've got first generation CPTED, second generation CPTED, and the continuous evolution. And we use that term of the holistic design. And that's what we talk about. It's bringing people together, bridging that gap between security, between architects, between designers, engineers, the whole shebang. Trying to ultimately make places safer, more secure, and what I like to feel is more prosperous for all. So whether you're looking at marginalized communities, affluent communities, as far as I'm concerned, safety, security, prosperity is a right, not a privilege, and what people feel they can do with that is up to them from that point.
Awesome. Well, we have the chat is already going.
Cool.
Charles Johnson is a fellow CPTED practitioner.
Cool.
He says hello.
Hi, Charles.
Bear is excited for this. He's Bear from Security Today podcast. He's excited for this one. My first question for you is really, for those who don't know, in the audience, what does CPTED stand for, and what is it?
Yeah, so CPTED, the coin was originally coined in 1971 by C. Ray Jeffries. And CPTED stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. Different people have changed it into different ways from designing out crime. But for me, at its core, it's crime prevention through environmental design. We spoke about first generation, second generation, and that holistic view. It's not specifically just to deal with mitigation, but it's also to enhance and soften the appeal of a space. So typically you look at a fortified area, it might mitigate potential threats and potential risk, but it also might hinder footfall and potential revenue for that organization or that business. And we don't want that. So I know we're going to get onto that ROI a bit later, but in terms of an organization or even a school, we want to make it a softened appeal. We want to make it attractive to the normal user, but at the same time, we want to displace that abnormal user from that space. We look at the UK, for example, more CCTV than any country in the world, yet crime is at the highest level it's ever been. So for me, again, talk about the holistic view. Yes, CCTV is important. It's excessively important. It's not the answer. So no one thing is the answer. And when we kind of bridge that gap and bring that combination of all the risk mitigation together, ultimately we want to do is make places safer, make people feel more secure, and make organizations and community prosper.
That's a great summary of what CPTED is. I appreciate that. For those who are just joining us in a live, the chat is open, so please shoot any questions Terry's way. He has been brave enough to accept the live questions from the audience, and Bear just shot one out. He's got two questions.
Okay.
One, as a security design engineer for a security integrator, what can I do in my career to get more involved with CPTED?
So the first thing that you can do is join the US CPTED Association. Some really, really, really useful resources. So uscpted.com. You're going to get so many valuable resources within that for any organization that you're part of. So whether it's security, architecture, engineering, I spoke about it so many times. Whatever resources, I know somebody was looking to conduct an assessment on a zoo within the US, and they were finding it difficult. They had not conducted an assessment on a zoo, and we were able to provide previous historical cases on a zoo, for example. So no matter what industry you work in, whatever specific field you work in within security, I would 100% advocate for US CPTED. As a member, I think it's $150 for the year. But again, the webinars you'll see pop up on a monthly basis, the resources and the community. So again, going back to CPTED as a whole, that connection, that community, being able to reach out to people from different communities, different industries, and feed off them in terms of their experiences and their expertise, hugely, hugely important. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing that you can do is, if you can, we spoke about it before we came on air, is attend one of the conferences. So again, next year is going to be the first week in February. I can't say the date because it hasn't been concreted yet, but it's going to be the first week in February. So this year was San Diego, last year was USF in Florida and Tampa. Next year it's going to be in Dallas, most likely. So again, if you go Dallas, if you have the opportunity to get to the US CPTED Association in a conference in Dallas in 2026, this is where you're going to meet people that are passionate, that are knowledgeable. But the really, really important thing about CPTED is, and what we do is, we have people that are working 30, 40, 50 years in what they do and constantly learning from each other. So I'm constantly looking at people who are doing new innovative stuff and how that's worked out for them. So mingling with those people. So if you go to GSX, ISC West, ISC East, US CPTED is the pinnacle when it comes to CPTED for me, in learning more about CPTED and how it's evolving over time, and it's evolving quickly. So there are two things that you can do.
Yeah, no, that's great. I believe that answers Bear's question. Join the organization, get involved. Somebody else also commented, gain CPTED certifications and training. That definitely helps. I know, like we mentioned before, with the PSP, it vaguely goes through CPTED, kind of just like as an overall principle. But
yeah, so that's a really good point on the certification.
Yeah.
If you can take one of the courses, the NICP, National Institute of Crime Prevention, NICP.com, you can take the basic class, and then you can go on and take the advanced class. And once you've taken both and passed both, then you can get your CPD accreditation, which lasts for 4 years. So again, I would encourage that type of education also.
Yeah, definitely. And I know Charles is also, he took the Florida course, and I heard that's kind of the gold standard as far as America goes, is that Florida one, because they're made it a state law, I believe.
Yeah, so Florida has
for multifamily.
Yeah, so Florida has the House Bill 837, and again, in order to conduct those assessments, you must have your FCP, your Florida CPTED practitioner, or be a member of law enforcement. So for the state of Florida, again, yes, the Florida CPTED practitioner is the gold standard.
Awesome. And Bear just put in his second question. What do you think about the champ Conor McGregor running for president?
We are live, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't. No comment.
No comment on that one.
No comment.
All right.
Let's just say I probably have a bigger chance.
There you go. Yeah. So you've worked in the field. I've kind of perused your LinkedIn, and we've talked a little bit, but
yep.
You've been in the security industry for over 25 years now.
For a while, yeah.
How have you seen the principles of CPTED evolve, and what are some recent innovations to the CPTED world that you're excited for most?
So it's really when I look at the integration of technology, and again, I go back to that overall holistic design. Like, particularly at the moment, I'm working with a lot of artificial intelligence when it comes to CCTV integration and how that can be used. It's so important. No matter what type of organization or business you are, whether it's a school looking at weapons detection, whether it's a retail business that's looking at, spillages, and integrating that into CPTED. And again, the cornerstone for me is that social cohesion, that social engagement, and understanding how you can integrate all of those innovative technologies in the future. So for me, I'm doing a lot of work with AI at the moment in terms of risk mitigation, but all types of risk mitigation, so not just that typical, violent intruder that might come into your property, but it could be from a health and safety perspective. So it's knowing that you can open up your imagination to the broader world in terms of what's coming and what's here at the moment. So a lot of stuff with AI, which is really, really important. And I'm seeing it picking up speed really, really quickly. And I know a dear friend of mine, I won't say who he is, he did say, whatever you're worried about in terms of AI at the moment, we solved that problem 2 years ago. What's coming, you're very much unaware of that at the moment. So I'm excited what's coming. I'm excited what's here now. The clients that I'm working with, it's working really, really well for them from a risk mitigation point of view, but also from that reputational point of view, from the customer service point of view, and identifying how they can be profitable. Because ultimately what I want to say is, from an organization, from a retailer, from a business, if you make your property more secure, safer, invariably it's going to make it more profitable and more attractive to people.
Yeah.
And it's going to displace that risk to another business or another organization. And I'm not the police. I can't solve the world's problems, but what I can do, I can work with businesses in order to protect those businesses, increase their profitability, increase their footfall, and decrease the risk that they might be come across.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, as just a consumer, I'd rather go to a place that looks a little bit more well put together and safer and cleaner. And, you talk about the outside of the building, swept area, kept area.
Absolutely.
Making sure.
Absolutely. And that's where we
talk about. I'd rather go to that.
We talk about the broken window theory. It's fairly basic, but it's really true. One broken window leads to two, leads to three, leads to a street, leads to two, leads to an overall town. So it's really, really important that you do that. So if we look at the overall design, and one kind of US retailer that I did work with had an issue. They did not have a budget for guarding, for security guards. But they had a serious problem when it comes to antisocial behavior and theft and violent incidents. So they provided themselves with a security guard for 1 month. It kind of solved the problem. But again, after a month, they just couldn't afford it anymore. So rather, this particular store, you may or may not know where it is or what it is, but they had issues with transient populations holding the door open and closed for customers. Now, there was no direct threat from the individuals based on our assessment. It was more down to the reputation and how it made the business feel. So invariably, customers were moving to the next store or choosing not to go into that store. So directly, it was impacting the footfall. It was directly impacting the profitability. And while the security was there, it was increasing the agitation, aggravation, and potential for trouble. So when we removed the door and replaced it with a revolving door that was a controlled mechanism, it completely changed the space, whereby the individual that was opening and closing the door now had no door to open and close and was forced to move to the next store where they could pursue their commercial activity, which meant there was no aggravation between the security or the store staff or the store management with this individual, where there was before. Now he had gone on and been displaced. So again, just through design, we were able to displace that problem, which is really, really important and cost effective. So 20 grand, as opposed to spending 20 grand a month on a guarding service, was a once-off payment and completely displaced that problem.
That's a great example. Just simply changing the door type and, it's solving that one problem.
Exactly.
That's huge.
Exactly. And a successful one.
Yeah. So we do have a question here. Do you ever run into scenarios where CPTED is not the best approach, or do you feel it always has its place when needed? When needs designed it correctly?
So a really, really great question. And I think I said beforehand when we came on, I never, ever, ever say once that any one solution is the right answer. And I go back to that kind of word of holistic. And it's really, really true to my heart and what I do. And again, I mentioned I spoke at GSX in 22 on that topic of bias versus experience. And you think about it, no matter what you do in the course of your private life, your personal life, whatever it is, you tend to veer on the side of bias as opposed to your experience. So for me, it will be really easy for me to be biased towards CPTED, but CPTED at its core is non-bias, and it's really based on experience of all the variables within crime prevention. So it really is at its cornerstone for me something that encapsulates everything to do with physical security, physical design, crime prevention, risk mitigation, all of those things. So for me, I look at every avenue. I try to identify through the threat assessment, whatever vulnerabilities are in place and the potential risk, how we can do that. And that only comes by multi-stakeholder collaboration, which is really, really important and the cornerstone. So for me to conduct an assessment or a CPTED assessment, the only way I can find out everything that happens on a particular site is by speaking to people that frequent that site at different times. And that's the best way. So taking in all the stakeholders from the business owners, the school district, the administrators, the SROs, all of the people that are involved in the day-to-day functions. These are the guys that have the eyes and ears on the street. Not me. I might pop in for a week or for 2 weeks. I might catch them on a good week or a bad week. These are the people that are going to feed back anecdotal or statistical evidence to me that I can base my further investigation on. So really, really big part of what I do.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads into the next question we got with from Bear.
Okay.
From a high-level view, as a CPTED practitioner, what roles are you interacting with when helping and educating the client? Do you perform assessments only, or do you work with their security contractor, general contractor on implementation of the design?
Yeah, so work with everybody. And I advocate for that. I really advocate for that. So I've worked with municipalities, I've worked with businesses, both semi-state, private, the whole lot. And it's really, really important for me to conduct the right and appropriate assessment to get all of that information and to get that return on investment and get that buy-in from people. People want to be heard. If I kind of rock into town and I'm the all-seeing, all-knowing, I'm going to tell you how to do your job and I'm going to cast doubt on what you've done up until this point, I'm not going to get them as part of the team. I need them to be part of my team. I need their intel, I need their experience, I need their expertise. And the only way I can do that is essentially by having a town hall meeting. Bring everybody together, find out what their grievances are, what they want from this, what they can give towards this. And most of the time, not all of the time, most of the time, that's a very, very successful route to go.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something that needs a full, quadrant of people to be able to solve a solution. Because like you said, talking to the everyday user, at all hours of the day, you kind of need that input. You need the input from the owner, you need input from the employees, and then also, the security contractor, right? Where, what are they experiencing as difficulties?
Hugely huge.
So yeah,
and what you might find is sometimes people have been reluctant to release information or intelligence for fear of being challenged. And maybe if they speak to somebody who's independent, they might be more likely to give that information. So it's really, really important from that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that, coming as a security consultant, a security contractor could be, telling an end user, a client, you have to do this, you have to do this. And they're like, yeah, well, I don't really want to, until, somebody else that, comes in as a, security expert and says the same thing. They're like, oh yeah, we should do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody
I've
else
experienced that a couple times. Yeah. Many security professionals struggle to convince decision makers to invest in CPTED strategies. What's your best argument for making CPTED a priority in site design?
So this is the easiest question of the whole lot, and probably the most important one for me. First of all, it's safety and security, obviously. But depending on the organization or depending on the business, unfortunately, as we all know, it's not always the paramount question that they want to hear. It can be a side effect or a side benefit, but it's not going to be the one that pushes them over the edge to conduct an assessment or to implement a security strategy. So they need to see that increase in reputation. that increase in footfall, that increase in profitability, if they have issues with staff retention, staff recruitment, if they have a safer property, a more secure property. I worked on a park recently, had a playground and stuff like that in it. And again, the politicians wanted to make it safe, but ultimately they were really concerned about re-election because it was coming up to re-election time. So for them, the return on investment is that re-election. And unlike the US, within Ireland, it's really difficult to get those crime analysis. So it's done on a CSO, which is your crime statistics, which is not released on a regular basis, such as you get. So it's quite difficult to get crime statistics for a particular area for a particular date. So the only way we could deal with that was to create that safety perception and security survey and track that over a weekly basis within the particular park area by the people that frequented that. And by doing that, we were able to quantify and qualify the level of safety and security perception by those particular people. That was the return on investment. Because when those politicians go back door knocking and looking for votes, they are now the ones that can say that the increase in safety and security that now you're perceiving was down to me, was down to our council, was down to our local municipality. And the same goes for retail or for businesses. Safety and security is a really, really good thing to have. And most businesses, I will say, want it and require it and expect it, but not all. And if you can create a solution that drives profitability, that increases footfall, that increases reputation, that's that return on investment for them, as opposed to, let's stick in 5 PTZ cameras, let's stick in 5 static cameras. Okay, well, what's that going to do for me? It's going to do X, Y, and Z. But it's probably not going to increase your reputation. It's not going to seriously displace your crime in the same kind of way. And it's not going to increase your profitability and your opportunity to seriously increase your finances. And that's what they want to hear. So if I can convince them of that argument and at the same time increase their security awareness and their crime prevention strategies and mechanisms, that's a bonus for them.
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to the bottom line, right?
It's the cost.
Yeah.
It's the cost. And unfortunately, too many people see security as a cost when, and this is a new conversation, when in fact they should see it as the complete opposite. Security is probably one of the most important investments you could ever make. And that's not me being biased. That's experience.
Yeah. Yeah. A few more questions came in while you're talking. What's your favorite CPTED implementation?
Ooh, so many. So many. I'm going to go with, again, I'm going to harp back to the previous point. I'll give you 2. So the social engagement for me is a really, really important part, because if you don't have people on board, you're kind of stuck from the start. So if you can get people to buy in from the beginning, really, really important. A really subtle nuance within CPTED for me that's really, really important and people don't notice, and I use it in retail a lot, are the transition zones. So using transition zones that go from public to semi-public to semi-private and private. You know, if you're out in the store the next time and you don't have, you know, hardened boundaries or hardened transition zones, there's a reason for those, and the normal person will adhere to them. Not everybody will, but they're really, really important, and I like them a lot, especially in apartment complexes. You know, it kind of delineates between those spaces, and also it beautifies it, which is really, really important in terms of softening the appeal. So yeah, transition zones are something that work really, really well within retail. You'll also see them within concession stores. They'll delineate between each concession and stuff like that. But for me, the cornerstone of CPTED is the social cohesion, and the engagement with the various stakeholders is absolutely fundamentally huge in terms of the overall success.
Good answer. Another question from Charles Johnson. Well, not much of a question, kind of more of a statement.
Okay.
Our technology focus segment of the security industry needs to be more open-minded about CPTED. I agree with that. The focus should be 3-pronged: organizational guards plus mechanical technology plus environmental CPTED.
I agree.
Yeah, 100%.
I agree, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. I think a lot of companies and organizations are beginning to wake up to what it can do and what it has been doing. It's not new. You and I know it's both. It's not new. Charles knows it's not a new concept. It's been around for a long, long time. It's evolving quickly. But any organization, any municipality that does use it seriously sees the positivity it does create in terms of the crime mitigation, crime prevention, but also that prosperity, which is what government want to see. It's what organizations want to see. We'll displace your problem. And again, we're not talking about displacing a problem and leaving people. I'm very mindful of the fact that, you know, we're dealing with unsheltered, we're dealing with people with illicit activities, we're dealing with people with overall societal problems that need to be assisted and supported. That's not what CPTED does. We're not saying we're pushing you under the carpet. And that's why it's really, really important that we work with all those various stakeholders to say, yes, this is what we want to do in this space. However, the people that are currently in this space, they need to be taken care of also. And that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. Another question from John. When does CPTED assessments merge past CPTED and into a full vulnerability assessment? And then do you include technology as part of the CPTED or vulnerability assessment?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I do both. So I'll do a CPTED assessment on its own, and then I'll do what I call a CPTED forensic security assessment, which will include both. So that's when I will look at the overall CPTED from natural surveillance, natural access control, territorial reinforcement, maintenance into the social management, the transition zones, wayfinding and stuff like that. And then we will look at the physical security. So we will look at the access control, we will look at the technology that's on site. A really, really good question and really, really important because CPTED doesn't address everything on its own, and it's important that people have that identified. So yeah, really, really good. And that's something that we would do.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to that previous statement about the three-pronged approach,
Yes.
you know, organizational, mechanical, environmental, kind of have to look at it all as one
hugely
package,
important.
right?
And I think if you veer off and prefer one or bias towards one, you're kind of losing the whole approach of what CPTED is. You know, it's understanding the importance of all and using each strength to the overall benefit of the overall project.
Yeah, I know part of my, you know, growth through the security industry is definitely getting more. I've always been pigeoned into the mechanical side, the technology side, and so kind of spread my wings a little bit, learning more about CPTED and the guard side, and physical security versus man security, and it's definitely a lot more. It's a lot broader of a statement saying that you're in the security industry,
yes,
than people think.
I think so.
If you could change anything, any one thing about CPTED and how it's taught or applied in the industry today, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it a moment ago. I think if we are going to do more, we need to incorporate CPTED more into planning and zoning across the globe. So a lot of places do it already, but it's kind of like the CPTED guy in the corner that has to be there but doesn't have a voice, and it's a token gesture and it's better than nothing, but it's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. So I think if you're going to have architects, if you're going to have engineers, if you're going to have qualified people, I think it's only right that you have qualified CPTED practitioners within the overall process and that they do have a voice and that's implemented correctly because it's a valuable voice and it's needed and it's warranted on so many levels. So if there's something I could change at a global level, I would have more CPTED practitioners involved and their voices to be heard as mandated as part of that overall process. Yeah. That's really, really important.
Which is slowly happening from what I can see, especially with the Florida, law being passed, and then what you guys are doing, you're kind of the thing you're doing on the side with the security
building council. Yeah, so a lot of that is happening already. I think we spoke earlier about when it's health and safety, when it's fire code, it's a legal obligation. They'll shut you down. Lives are dependent on it. Until we get to that level with security, where it's legislated for, organizations for the most part will do it. If it costs too much money to do it, it won't be done, and that's not right. When people's lives, so we spoke at the ACS conference with Leo Dess in DC a couple of years ago about the Secure Building Shield certification, and we kind of aligned the fire code. We had an incident in Dublin in 1981 where almost 50 people died, where if we had to learn from the Chicago fire, which is 24, 25 years previously, we would have learned more, and we definitely would have saved so many of those lives, if not all of those lives. And when we look at security, we look at it from a myopic point of view. Can we learn from previous experiences outside of our industry? Can we save lives? We look at that incident in North Macedonia, whether you heard of that, where all those children died in that nightclub for so many reasons, 14-year-olds in a venue that wasn't fit for purpose. So there's so much that we can do, but until we begin to legislate globally as a security industry and have that mandated, it will be done predominantly on the basis of it's the right thing to do, it will protect assets, or it costs too much. So I'm hoping that we do get to that point, and I believe we will, because I can see the change.
Yeah, 100%. Charles in the chat mentioned that in the U.S., the Tampa, Hillsborough County in Florida area has codified CPTED into their building zoning process. So that's good. That's good progress.
So we need more of that, and that does take place. We do need more of that. But until we move away from just having the CPTED guy in the corner as part of the process, until we have him signing off on all of these processes everywhere, but we're on the right track, slowly but surely.
Yeah, I agree. And going into this year, with the new, I guess kind of give us a little bit of what's different between the America and Europe CPTED. Is there different strategies on how you operate and test for vulnerabilities?
Yeah, there's so much difference. It's unbelievable. In terms of CPTED, we spoke about, it's not a new concept. When you speak to people over here, it's considered a brand new concept, which is frightening in itself. So we need more people to know about it. We need people to know about the benefits of it, what it can do in terms of crime reduction, crime prevention, the overall threat mitigation and stuff like that. So I think if we can continue to spread the global movement of what it can do and the benefits of that on so many levels, that's the main difference I see between the US and the time I spend in the US and the time I spend in Europe. The lack of information and the lack of understanding of the benefits to it. That's something that we could change and become on par with.
Yeah. Another question, with the rise of mixed-use developments, how can CPTED strategies be designed to balance the needs of business, residential, and public spaces effectively?
Yeah, so that's kind of happening already. Even here, we go back to the second generation of CPTED with the social engagement. It's really important to understand. And if you look at that House bill we talked about, 837 in Florida that came in, it's quite minor in terms of what we talk about, but it's, a peephole or a window viewer, but it's something. And unless you have open dialogue with all of those stakeholders you mentioned, nobody's going to have much interest in what's going to take place. So when you have those multifamily, when you have those businesses, what's the benefit? What's the reduction? What's the improvement? What's in it for me? And I think if you can champion that cause and get that message across, then you have a much better chance of bringing everyone to the table and, in a sense, winning your arguments for why you should do what you plan to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like even the design of the multi-tenant, you have the residential, the business, all in one building. That kind of is almost a CPTED principle, right? Where you have eyes on businesses. If people are living there and constantly moving through the lobby space and
even the basics of the
movement
of the orientation. I've worked in properties in the US also where the curtains have been drawn, the chairs and desks have been faced away from the window, where we've simply at no cost we've removed the drapes or the curtains, we've reorientated the chairs and the desks, so people invariably will look out into the window when they see movement, because people are naturally nosy. And again, if it's that threat, it could give you 20 feet, 30 feet, 50 feet notice of somebody approaching you with a weapon, or somebody that could be leaving with somebody or with an asset they shouldn't be leaving with. So there are simple little things that can be done when you know what needs to be done within the overall prospect of CPTED.
Yeah, and I know a huge thing here, at least in the States, is the active shooters in schools. And then just having that simple, the admin desk has a window facing the entrance, and, that's an easy thing to design, but it's not something that everybody thinks about. I know in my son's school, they have to have an intercom to see who's out there. They don't have that direct line of sight, which should be brought up.
Yeah, really important. And as we talk about natural surveillance and that clear line of sight to see who's approaching from all angles, anywhere, it's really, really important that we see that, who they are, what they're carrying, if they're coming, if they're leaving, and who they're coming in or leaving with, really, or what they have, really important. So natural surveillance is really, really important.
Yeah. CPTED often, focuses on deterring crime before it happens. But how can we leverage the design to improve emergency response and crisis management during situations like an active shooter?
Yeah, so talk about it before the fact, and we often talk about it. I read the report recently on Appalachia, in Georgia. I'm not sure if you were able to read that report, but it was quite a detailed report. A friend of mine did, and quite harrowing, as they all are. But we look at a student that only transferred into that school a couple of days beforehand, and the amount of opportunities that there was to intercept that particular incident before it occurred, in terms of mental health issues at home, triggers, intelligence, warnings. In the UK, they'll always say something on public transport, see something, say something. And within retail, you'll have whistleblowing. So when it comes to situations like that, it's really, really important that information, whether it be true or not true, that it's taken on board and reacted upon and dealt with. But when we talk about when somebody arrives on site, you look at, again, natural surveillance in terms of the stairwells. Can you see into the school? Can you see in through the stairwell in case there's somebody standing there?
Right.
Wayfinding under duress or under stress. So do you know how to leave the property? When somebody comes into the property, do they know where they're going? Those things are vitally, vitally important. So at the lowest level to the highest level, when we have signage at pedestrian scale that clearly delineates where you are going, where you should be going, especially when you are under severe stress from an incident like that, that is something that CPTED really, really, really can help with. In terms of any building, private building, public building, school, organization, whatever it's going to be. So the wayfinding and the signage is really important. The training, the awareness. I don't advocate for any specific active shooter or active assailant training. I've looked at them all. I'm an instructor in one. I don't need to say who it is. But it's really, really important that level of training is taught at age appropriate level, and that everybody understands how to react. And CPTED is a big part of that, in terms of engaging with people, become security conscious, become crime prevention conscious, become aware of your spaces. And again, if something doesn't feel right, say something. It's so important. So again, the wayfinding is really, really important.
Yeah, I know. My kids' school is kind of a CPTED nightmare, I would say. We're in a large residential community and it's plopped right in the middle of it. And so it's butted up with a bunch of fence lines, and, line of sight is huge. You can, somebody can be in their backyard looking straight into the kids' school.
Yeah.
Luckily, the school itself is all in one big brick building, but, the kids are playing out on the playground, anything can happen.
It's so important, even in terms of evac and reunification points. It's really, really important in terms of placement. So within CPTED, placement is really, really important also. So when we look at reunification after the fact, we look at bottlenecks of people coming in, multiple amounts of families. How can we deal with that? And it's really, really important, again, that we deal with that appropriately.
Yeah. And Charles put in the chat that very recently another student showed up at Appalachia High School with a fire alarm, only 6 to 8 months removed from the first shooting. Thankfully, they were caught and arrested without harming anyone. So that's crazy that it happened.
It's crazy.
So recently.
It's crazy, and I think until people, you need to react. No matter what level crime you're dealing with, if you feel vulnerable. Put it this way: if I saw a really, really good video on this recently, a woman who's getting into a lift, she's on the 15th floor of an apartment block, and she goes to get into a lift to leave, and as the lift door opens, there are two males standing in the lift. She looks at both, she looks away, and she still gets into the lift. And the comment was, in any other environment, by any other creature, the natural reaction is to run, because it's not the right thing to do. It's just nuts, so it really, really is nuts. When the threat is there, your levels are heightened, your reactions are strong, and you need to just trust your gut. And whether it's reporting,
I'm sure in her gut was telling her to not go in that elevator.
Yeah. So even if somebody's not comfortable to say something directly, it's important that they report that. Even if they are wrong, it's better to say something and be wrong than to say nothing and for the incident to take place.
Yeah. Charles put lift equals elevator in the chat for the Americans. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Good man, Charles.
What are some of the biggest mistakes organizations or city planners make when they're trying to implement CPTED, and how can they be avoided?
First of all, they probably don't know what it is, and are kind of doing something similar, which I see quite often. So I think and not everybody, but I think if you're going to do it well, embrace it, bring the right people in internally, educate them, gain experience. And again, going back to that holistic collaborative approach, engage with other stakeholders. If you're a municipality, talk to other municipalities. If you're an organization, do likewise. Engage with organizations and get them certified so they understand exactly what they should be doing and the return that will come from that. But it's important that they do it well, and they can do it well.
Yeah, 100%. And there's, often tension between aesthetics and security when designing. How can you balance that designing a space for both safe and welcoming, but try not to make it look like a fortress or a prison, or
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question, and I love that question because we worked on a train station or a tram stop, and it was a test case. So the test case was it had 100 feet of railing around the tram stop, which was in the middle of the street in a European city. And we decided to remove half of the railing because they were getting fare evaders or people jumping over the railing and not paying. And this was only a 4-foot railing, not paying for their tram fare, which was like $2.50. So we decided when they were taking it down to leave half of the railing up, and we asked them to leave that half wherever they chose fit, and we would replace the other half with vegetation, dense, hostile, beautification in terms of vegetation. And we did that. It was 2 foot high by 4 foot deep. Not one person attempted to walk through, jump over, or gain entry over the vegetation. Yet the fare evading continued to take place at the same volume over the railings, which was 4 feet high, covered in security paint. I'm not sure if you know the security paint, but it's sticky, gooey paint that can stay on your clothes for some time. It's not pretty, but it's a lot easier than jumping 4 feet when a hedge or hostile vegetation is 2 feet high. It's a lot easier than walking through it and ripping your clothes or destroying your sneakers. So you can see by design we can beautify, we can still discourage, and people will say to me, that's not going to work everywhere. Of course it's not. You're not going to stick a 2 foot, 4 foot bush around a prison and expect people not to leave. Of course they will. It's based on the level of risk associated with that space.
Right.
People were not willing to walk through or jump over a 4 foot wide, 2 foot high, dense hedge because it wasn't worth the hassle. They would rather continue to jump over the rail. So we proved that we could make it more pleasant, soften the appeal, and beautify it without the need to target harden and fortify on that occasion.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking about that, I feel like who has mastered that. I don't know if you've been to a Disney World or Disney
I have.
park.
Yeah.
They've kind of mastered that, making things have a flow of traffic while still blocking things off.
Just that natural access control. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks really cool.
Yeah,
it looks really, really cool. And it's nice and it's pretty. And again, it softens that space and attracts people back into the environment, but makes it less attractive to that individual who wants to either overcome the fear or do something they shouldn't do on that occasion.
Yeah, but that's crazy that just because there's a 2 foot hedge, they wouldn't want to go past it.
Yeah, just it's too much hassle to jump over a 2 foot hedge that's 4 foot wide, and you can't walk through it because it's too dense. But yes, it's got nice pink flowers in it, so it looks good. We'll just continue to jump over the 4 foot railing. It's easier.
Right. Yeah. So if any planners and designers are listening, put a hedge instead of a fence.
100%.
but like you said, it depends on
It depends on the risk or the
the
threat.
level of
Yeah,
security.
yeah, of course. You're not going to stick a 2-foot, 4-foot hedge around a prison.
Right.
And if you
That
do, if
needs
you
to look like a fortress.
if you do, you have some very obedient prisoners in that prison.
Right. Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about, we talked a lot about CPTED, and it's been great to talk about. I don't know if you're open to talking about, kind of the other things that you do. As you mentioned that you're a certified investigative interviewer, and, tell us a little bit kind of that background and how that all feeds together into your experience with CPTED.
Yeah, so that's again, it goes back to that talking to people and understanding the dynamics and reading people's body language and knowing what somebody wants to get out of it. So that really spawned my retail security environment as part of the investigations into internal theft, predominantly, and understanding the psychology behind why people do what they do. How can we best deal with those situations, and how can we uncover, in fact, what they've done? And again, it ties in really, really well with crime prevention through environmental design and understanding the power of people, understanding why people do what they do. And again, the local intelligence and gaining information from people within the team, whether that's through direct whistleblowing, indirect whistleblowing, or again, the see it, say it movement, where people will come to you with that information. So it became a big part of what I did in terms of the investigation internally within retail, within theft and fraud. So spent a good bit of time with that. Don't do it as much anymore, but again, a really exciting part of the past. And we got some good catches in our time during that period also. Yeah, some big catches. People you wouldn't think either.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have roughly 15 or so minutes left. I would like to also get in, talk about your book.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us, tell the audience, and what you kind of just finished the manuscript, right?
Yeah. So I literally finished it last week. Finally, I did add in 2 extra chapters, and I may add in 2 extra more as time goes by. But the plan is the book is called A CPTED Paradigm. I do have a little picture here of it. That's from the manuscript. Nice. Yeah, that's probably reversed. CPTED Paradigm, a holistic approach to crime prevention, and looking at so many nuances within CPTED and crime prevention, where it came from, where it is, where I expect it to move and innovate over time, how it's evolving and how it's adapting to technology. We spoke about artificial intelligence, how we can use that, how we can use the psychological aspect of people when it comes to mitigating risk, how we can discover kind of risk before it takes place. And the whole synopsis of the book, or the whole idea of the book, has been to continue the growth globally of the CPTED music. And one note to that effect is every single cent of the book will go directly from Amazon to the I Love You Guys Foundation, based out of Denver. Nice. I'm not sure if you're aware of the I Love You Guys Foundation, but a horrible story about that young kid, Emily, who texted her parents for the last time to say I love you guys before she was killed during an active shooter event. So a really well worthwhile foundation that I'm really fond of in terms of the book. And actually Pat Hamilton, who's with the I Love You Guys Foundation, is part of the outreach committee at the Secure Building Council. So great people doing great work. So for me, it's about spreading the movement. It's about spreading the word. It's about encouraging people to continue to promote CPTED. It's about encouraging people to get involved in CPTED, to attend the conferences, to take the classes. The amount of people I've championed about CPTED, that I've taken the classes because I've told them it will change their whole space. It will change their mindset in how they look at security. Not only security, how they look at their whole professional life in terms of that holistic approach. So it's been a big undertaking. It's been the guts of 10 months.
Yeah.
And as you said, the manuscript is something that I've just recently completed. It will look at the first generation, second generation, where we're going to move on to. I have dedicated a specific chapter to Ireland because I would literally be hounded until the end of time. I have also dedicated a specific chapter to active shooter, and also one to domestic violence, which may come as a shock to many people, and how CPTED can help mitigate domestic violence in the overall design plan of a property, of a community, but also in terms of the on-the-ground communication between neighbours, how people feel comfortable, destigmatizing domestic violence and bringing it into the open environment so people don't feel ashamed, when in fact it should be the other way around. So it's really born out of experience. I have with a dear friend of mine that unfortunately did succumb to an issue like that, and we worked closely on a presentation for US CPTED a couple of years ago. So that's a really important thing for me. So I think towards the end of the book, we look more at specifics around CPTED. And the reason for that is it's something that's quite close to me, but to highlight to people that CPTED is a concept that really, really can mitigate or work with so many different things within society, not just security or crime prevention. The whole ethos and the whole idea of CPTED is something that we can use within our daily routine. And that's really the whole idea behind the book. And I hope that as many people as possible will download the book on Amazon, which I, again, of course, will upload, will put on LinkedIn when it does go live this year, which again will be announced fully, at the Secure Building Council event that I can't say where because it's not official, in New York anyway, on November 18th, which is a Tuesday, which is official. So that's going to be official launch date, and then I'll do a second launch at the US CPTED conference in February in Dallas, Texas. Dallas, go Texas! Yeah,
no, I'm very excited for this book and to dive into it.
Thank you.
I know in Deadbolt Society, me and Bear and I are kind of wanting to start like a book club.
Wow.
Kind of, going through, security related books, obviously, but definitely want to get that.
Well, that's amazing. Part of them. And you know what? I love that you say that. So one of my best friends in the whole world, and he's a far greater man than I will ever be, is Tom Chiz, who I think you're going to have on in June. Tom is the CEO and founder of Armored One, and Tom is the greatest person that you could ever come across, the most genuine and humble man ever. He released a book last June or July, Staying One Step Ahead, Ending America's Active Shooters, and it's the most amazing book. If you haven't read it, or if anyone hasn't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's phenomenal.
Well, definitely.
It's amazing. But again, if you're going to start a book club, I would definitely include the book of Tom Chiz, Staying One Step Ahead, as your number one book.
All right. Well, maybe we'll start with that one.
There you go, and then you can throw
That's awesome.
When I get my one out, I'll make sure I get you a signed copy straight away.
Oh, perfect.
Cool.
That sounds great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me
here at Deadbolt Live, and look forward to meeting you in person, at one of these events. And
of course,
I know myself very excited about CPTED and learning more. So I'll be definitely diving in and learning as much as I can to help move the industry forward.
Love it. Thank you so much.